This happened when I was really young. I'm talking second or third grade. It's hard for me to remember things clearly from that long ago, but this memory stands out for reasons you'll soon understand. It was a school day, and it had been raining cats and dogs all day. After picking me up from school, my parents left the house for some upscale events. I can't remember if it was a fundraiser or a dinner party or something else entirely. Either way, they were supposed to come back home that night, but while they were gone, the storm picked up like crazy, and it became unsafe to drive long distances. So instead of driving back home, they reluctantly decided to spend the night at one of their friends' houses who lived much closer to where the event was. I remember them calling me on the house phone and repeatedly apologizing for leaving me there by myself, even though I insisted that I wasn't even hungry and I'd be fine. My mom gave me a list of things to do before bed. Lock all the doors and windows, keep at least one house light on, make sure all the blinds were closed, typical stuff. At the time, I didn't understand why they were making such a big deal about everything. I wasn't quite old enough to realize how important it was to not leave kids my age home alone. In fact, I was actually kind of excited to have the place to myself. It meant unlimited candy and no bedtime. I obviously didn't have a TV or any kind of screen in my room, so I stayed downstairs in the living room watching TV on the couch. I told myself I'd do all that stuff my mom had requested right before going to sleep, since I was planning on staying up all night anyway. But at some point later in the night, the sugar crash got to me and I accidentally fell asleep. No surprise there. I don't remember exactly what time I ended up waking up, but it was late enough for the TV to have gone into sleep mode, so 3 hours minimum. I distinctly remember being much colder when I woke up. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I mean, temperatures drop at night, but the difference was significant enough for me to instantly make the connection, even at that young age. I thought about just curling back up and going back to sleep, but then I remembered the list my mom had given me. Even at that age, I knew she'd find out if I didn't do it, and I really didn't want to get in trouble after she trusted me to stay home alone. So I forced myself off the couch and went to check the windows and doors. I went around and did everything she asked. Locked the front and back doors, closed all the blinds, checked the windows, even the light. Everything was shut tight, which confused me a little because the house still felt way colder than it should have. I even put my hand against a couple of the windows to make sure they weren't cracked open or something, but they were all sealed. I figured maybe the storm knocked out the heater or something, and I didn't think much more about it. That explanation made sense to me at the time, and I was so tired that I couldn't devote more energy to thinking about the heat. So I headed upstairs to my room, ready to crawl into bed and forget about it. When I got to my room, I finally realized just how bad the storm had gotten. Our living room is tucked into the center of the house, so I hadn't really been able to appreciate the storm from down there. My childhood bedroom has a big external window though, so I could hear everything. The rain was slamming against the glass like it was trying to get in, and every minute or so there was a burst of lightning followed by a deafening clash of thunder. I wasn't scared of storms at that age, but I do remember being concerned that a tree was going to fall on the house. That's probably why I had trouble falling back asleep, even though I had been dead tired not even 20 minutes prior. As I was lying there, trying to fall asleep, I started picking up on these odd sounds. Every so often, there were these weird creaking sounds, like shifting wood. Thing is, the entire floor is carpeted, so it couldn't have been coming from my room. At first, I thought it was a tree swaying in the wind, but the sound didn't quite fit. Even then, I knew the general sounds associated with thunderstorms. This definitely wasn't one of them. It started bothering me after a while. For whatever reason, it wasn't the storm keeping me up. It was that stupid sound. I couldn't take it much longer, so I sat up and looked around the room, not really sure what I was looking for. I listened, trying to drown out the sounds of the storm and focus in on the creaking. Lightning flashed, illuminating the whole room. Everything looked normal, but my eyes were drawn to the only wooden thing in the room, the closet. The room went dark again, and I sat there perfectly still. About a minute later, lightning flashed again, and my room was once again lit up for just a split second. And in that split second, I saw something that made me choke. The closet door was slightly ajar. It had been closed before, I was 100% sure of it. Something had opened it. There was something in my room. I didn't scream, I didn't speak, I didn't even think. I just got out of bed as quietly as I could and walked out of the room. That walk from the bed to the door felt like a 500-mile, 5-year journey. I immediately went downstairs and hid under the dining room table. Then, and only then, I started crying. I didn't know what else to do. There was someone in my house, in my room, and my parents were too far away to help me. I'm not sure how long I stayed under that table, but at one point, I heard footsteps walking down the stairs. I held my breath, knowing that any sound I made could have ended my life. They weren't normal footsteps. It sounded like whatever it was jumping and pinballing down the stairs. The footsteps got closer. They were approaching the dining room table like they knew where I was hiding. I can't tell you how scared I was. I really thought I was gonna die. And then, from under the table, I saw them. I couldn't see their upper body, but two bare feet walked into view. Two nasty, wet, and muddy legs that were tinted yellow. I couldn't tell if they were male or female legs. That's how gross and almost disfigured they looked. There were cuts all over their legs, like they had rolled around in a thorn bush. They were also stumbling, like they were struggling to even stand upright. And just as I thought it couldn't get any worse, they dropped something. It was a wrench. It clattered against the floor, and I'm telling you, it took every fiber in my being to fight back a scream. If that person bent down to pick the wrench up, they'd definitely see me. With wide eyes, I watched as that person stood still, not picking up the wrench, but not walking away either. It felt like a standoff, where any wrong move could end my life. Eventually, they finally continued walking, and I couldn't see them anymore. I listened as the chaotic footsteps stomped and stumbled around my first floor for what felt like an eternity. And then, finally, the front door opened and shut. They were gone. I stayed hidden under that table for a long time after that. Part of it was fear, but another part of it was what I can only describe as trauma. I just remember being shaken and scared. I was at the ripe age where I understood how dangerous the situation was, but not old enough to know how to deal with it. The rest of the night was kind of a blur. I picked the wrench up off the floor, not wanting my parents to find it the next morning. After making sure the front door was locked, I slunked back upstairs, crawled into bed, and fell asleep. Everything went back to normal after that. For whatever reason, I was terrified to tell my parents. I didn't want them to find out I hadn't locked the doors and done everything they had asked me to do, so I just kept the whole thing to myself. It wasn't until several years later that I told them the story, and it actually took some convincing for them to believe me. Looking back, not telling them the moment it happened was an awful decision since there was nothing that could have been done about it so far removed from the incident. If I'm being frank, this experience traumatized me for basically the rest of my childhood. I slept with a nightlight from then on, and I developed a fear of the dark that didn't go away for a long time. I still have trouble explaining what happened that night, but I learned my lesson. Lock your doors at night. This happened last year during Hollywood Bash weekend. I go to Rowan University, and for anyone who doesn't know, Holly Bash is Rowan's big spring festival, kind of like our own mini Coachella. It's held every April on Hollybush Green, right near the historic Hollybush Mansion. There are carnival rides, food trucks, lawn games, and a concert with a surprise headliner. The whole campus shows up. It's supposed to be the most fun day of the year. I was a sophomore at the time, and like a lot of other students, I stayed out late that night. Rowan's in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood. Glassboro doesn't really feel dangerous, even at 2 in the morning. That's probably why I didn't think much of it when I left my friend's dorm and started walking back to Chestnut Hall alone. What I didn't know was that earlier in the night, around 12:30 a.m., a group of masked people, like 10 of them, maybe more, had been seen banging on doors and riding bikes around campus, including outside Chestnut. I personally never saw that firsthand, but apparently it was alarming enough that people were posting about it online while it was happening. I didn't check any of that stuff. I was just trying to get back to my dorm. So it's about 2:30 a.m. I swipe into Chestnut Hall, go inside, and I'm walking towards the stairs when I notice someone sitting in the lounge. That alone isn't weird. It's a college dorm. People are up all the time, but the guy was wearing a mask, not a COVID mask, like a full-on black ski mask, and he wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, dead silent. It took me a second to process. I actually paused near the entrance of the lounge, kind of frozen. It didn't make sense. I had no idea what he was doing there or why he was masked, but it genuinely freaked me out. And then, he jumped off the couch and turned towards me in one quick motion. I didn't even think. I ran down the hall and ducked into the nearest bathroom, locking the door behind me. I must have stayed in there for at least 5 minutes, long enough to hear the hallway go completely silent again. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but my gut was screaming at me. Eventually, I cracked the door open and peeked out. No one was in the hall. I thought maybe he had left. I stepped out. I didn't want to sprint and freak myself out even more, so I just walked toward the other exit. That's when I saw him again. He was still in the lounge, still masked, and this time he was directly across from where I had to walk. His bike was leaned against the door, and there was a chair wedged between the wall and the frame, like it had been jammed there on purpose. I had pepper spray on my keychain. I pulled it out and held it in front of me. I didn't aim or threaten him. I just showed that I had it, hoping it would be enough. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked past him. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't even flinch. It was like he wanted me to see him, like the fear was the whole point. I didn't look back. I pushed the other door open and left the building. I was halfway to Magnolia when I heard the sound of bikes behind me. 3 more masked people rode up next to me. They didn't touch me or try to grab me, but they were heckling me, laughing, saying things I couldn't make out. I know that sounds pretty harmless on its own, but a few of them were waving around what looked like guns, which was the part that freaked me out the most. I guess they could have been fake or airsoft guns even, but it was clear that they were trying to intimidate me. I tried to ignore them, but I could feel how close they were riding, just barely out of arm's reach. I made it to Magnolia and texted my friend to come meet me outside. He walked me back to Chestnut, and that made me feel a lot safer. Luckily, the bikers were gone by then. I didn't call the police that night. I wasn't hurt, but I was really scared. I can't even fully explain why. It wasn't until the next morning that I told my mom everything. She ended up reporting it, and later that night, some of my guy friends texted me that they'd also been approached by a group of masked guys, and a few of them had pulled guns. Nobody was hurt, but it was enough that campus police started taking it seriously. I've heard a lot of rumors about who those guys were. Some people think it was just a bunch of local kids trying to scare people. It's just the gun detail that freaks me out. It's likely that a group of armed, non-students had somehow made their way into my dorm that night, the place I live. I've been scared to walk home alone ever since. It was a normal Friday afternoon at my high school. I was walking down a hallway with my friend Emma as she talked about God knows what. I was just trying to get through the day because I honestly had a lot to deal with at home as well as at school, being that my foster parents weren't the nicest people to say the least. As we walked past the lunchroom, I suddenly had to use the bathroom. I asked Emma if she had to go. She said no and that she would wait outside for me. I went into the bathroom and immediately noticed no one else was in there. I thought to myself, that was weird, because out of the multiple bathrooms in the school, this one was always packed at any given time. I shrugged it off and went into a stall, and a few seconds after getting in the stall and sitting down, I heard the bathroom entrance door open and shut abruptly, and someone entering the bathroom, but I didn't hear them move after entering. I didn't think anything of this. It wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Maybe it was someone hiding from an admin. I went about my business. I stood up to button my jeans and read the writing on the bathroom wall. It was a bunch of random quotes and rants about teachers. Then I heard the door open again, and I assumed whoever was in here had left. I came out of the stall, and as I left the bathroom, Emma was looking at me with a weird face, almost like a "what the hell did I just see" face. I asked her what was up, and she asked me, "Who was that standing right behind you in the bathroom stall?" I got chills. I told her no one was in the stall with me and to stop fucking with me. She promised me she wasn't. She told me she actually came in seconds before I came out because she realized she did need to go. But then she saw someone else in the stall, standing with their shoes touching the back of mine. That's how close they were behind me in the stall, and she said she left immediately, not wanting to witness whatever was going on. I reiterated again I was the only one in the stall. However, I had heard someone come in, but I never heard them use the bathroom, and I had assumed they were hiding from an admin. That's when she told me no one went near the door until she came in seconds before I came out. I didn't believe in the paranormal, but this made my stomach sink. I found an admin and told her about it, and she pretty much tried to assure me that it didn't happen, that Emma was probably just messing with me. But Emma was never one to take things seriously or be serious in general, so when she looked me in the eyes with a serious face and told me word for word what she saw, I felt like it actually happened, and something really was in there with me, along with the fact that I heard the bathroom door open and close twice. I'm 18 now, and I haven't forgotten it since. This happened when I was a young child, maybe like 8 years old. My parents had me late. My two older siblings are both at least 10 years older than me. I was woken up in the middle of the night to a commotion from downstairs one night. It was my parents. I cracked my door open and heard my parents freaking out about something. I wasn't sure what it was. I went to the stairway and stood at the top, calling down, "Mom? Dad?" My mom came to the bottom of the stairs and said to me, "Go back to bed." I listened without asking any questions. I could tell they were stressed about something though. I was trying to go back to sleep when I heard the front door downstairs slam shut, and then it was dead silence. I presumed they left the house, but I wasn't sure why. Either way, I listened to my mom and went back to sleep. I woke up again to sounds downstairs once more. It was the sound of the front door closing, and then footsteps, but no talking. Naturally, I assumed they were back home and just being quiet so that they wouldn't wake me up. I heard occasional steps and thuds from downstairs. I heard drawers and cabinets being opened and closed, and I thought for sure I heard the fridge opening too. I thought it was my older brother Chris, who's 10 years older than me, and at the time he was already driving, so he was going out and coming home late. So him getting home at like 2 a.m. and rummaging the fridge wasn't abnormal at all. These are all things I was telling myself, logical explanations as to what I was hearing. Eventually, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, getting louder and closer until they reached the top, and then made their way first thing to my door. My door quietly and slowly opened. I didn't sit up or move. I just had my eyes open facing the door as I was still laying down. There weren't any lights on outside of my room. Whoever was walking around was doing so in the dark, so all I saw was this black mass at my doorway, resembling the shape of someone's head. I said every name starting from Chris to Mom to Dad, then I just said, "Who's there?" They didn't reply. They just closed the door, and I was left there confused but mildly creeped out. I heard footsteps going downstairs. I was convinced it was my dad now, just coming to check on me after getting home, though I wasn't sure why he was ignoring me. I didn't hear anything from downstairs for a while now. I allowed curiosity to get the better of me, and I went downstairs in the dark. I kept all the lights off as I was approaching the kitchen, and I froze at the doorway, noticing a tall figure standing right in the middle of the kitchen. I said, "Dad?" assuming it was him just based off the size of this person. A deep voice said, "Go back upstairs." I ran back up the stairs to my room and closed the door and jumped under the covers. All I was thinking was, why did my dad's voice sound like that? The reality of a stranger being in the house didn't dawn on my innocent little mind. Not until a little later, when I heard the front door opening and a commotion from downstairs again. The voices of my parents. I went to the top of the stairway again, and they were shocked to see I was still awake. I asked what happened. They told me that Chris had a little accident, but that he was going to be fine. I found out months later that he had gotten into a car accident driving in a condition that he shouldn't have been driving in. My parents got a call from the hospital, and so they rushed to see him first thing, leaving me to sleep. I asked my dad if he had come in my room before, and that was when I learned that they had been gone for hours. My mom started freaking out, yelling at my dad because he had neglected to lock the door when they rushed out of the house. Me telling my parents about the person at my bedroom door and in the kitchen caused my dad to search the house with his gun, and my mom to call the police. The last thing I really remember was being asked by a police officer to give my story. My parents tell me that they felt like morons having to explain to the cops that they left me alone and left the door unlocked. I don't think anything of value was stolen. Even though whoever broke into the house clearly didn't have intentions of harming me, having a complete stranger in your house is already a terrifying ordeal. Now imagine going through that at 8 years old. I'm an only child and live with my mom and dad in a decently sized home. It's a little big for just the three of us, but my parents' running joke is that it was never their intention to have only one kid. They just never got around to having more. Anyway, I was 15 when this happened. It was a rainy Saturday night sometime in May. I can't remember exactly when this happened, but I do remember that it was during one of the last weekends before summer started up. There's one last thing I have to mention. I have a lot of weird medical conditions that make my life difficult. I get frequent panic attacks, faint easily, and struggle breathing at times. I'm also one of those weird people who needs complete and total silence to fall asleep. Like, even a small fan is enough to keep me awake. I've mostly learned how to deal with it, but sleepovers and vacations are still unbearable. People always tell me they love the sound of rain and that it helps them fall asleep, but it does the exact opposite for me. It doesn't rain often where I'm from, but every now and then we get these insane downpours that keep me up all night. To be fair, it wasn't a full-on thunderstorm, but it was raining heavily enough to keep me up. No matter what I tried, I couldn't block out the sound of raindrops pattering against the roof. It was late, sometime well after midnight, when I faced the reality that I wasn't going to sleep anytime soon. So I got out of bed and thought about ways I could expend some energy. Eventually, I decided to go for a little walk in the rain. This wasn't the first time I had done that. Walking in the rain was actually something my parents encouraged me to do when I couldn't sleep. We live in a very safe residential area, and there's a huge public park that borders my house, so being out late isn't dangerous at all. Plus, the park is very well lit, which is another one of the reasons I've always felt so comfortable walking there late at night. I put on a rain jacket, quietly walked downstairs, and stepped outside without even bothering to bring an umbrella. I purposely didn't bring my phone because I knew myself well enough that a phone screen was only going to keep me up. It was oddly peaceful outside. I've always been one for nature, and seeing all the trees gently swaying in the wind with the raindrops screaming down their branches was exactly what I wanted. After about 20 minutes, I started to feel myself getting tired, which was a good thing. I turned around and started walking back towards my house, figuring I'd be able to fall asleep by the time I got back. As I was cutting through the park, I glanced toward the road and saw something strange. There was a long black object lying flat in the middle of the street. At first, I thought it was an oddly shaped garbage bag or something like that, but the more I looked at it, the more I realized what it was. It was a person just lying there in the middle of the street. They were face down too from the looks of it. I felt a sick feeling bubbling up in my stomach. The only thought bouncing around my brain was the likely possibility that they had been hit by a car and were injured. Or worse. There was no other logical reason why someone would be lying motionlessly in the street, especially while it was raining. As much as my gut told me to just keep my head down and continue walking, I felt like I had to do something. My parents raised me a certain way. If I see a person in need, I have to help them. So against my instincts, I started approaching the person in the street. As I got closer, I was able to make out what they were wearing. Black pants and a dark plaid shirt. Definitely not the type of attire someone would wear during heavy rain. Judging by the clothing, it was a man, but that's what I had already assumed. I'm not sure if it was the gravity of the situation or something else, but as I was walking toward the street, I realized for the first time that night how cold I was. Like the rain was lukewarm one second and ice cold the next, if that even makes any sense. As I was closing in on the road, a screech rang out from somewhere behind me. Instinct took over and I whipped my head around, adrenaline flooding my veins. It sounded like a howl, but slightly off. Like a wounded animal, that's the only way I can describe it. A quick scan of the tree line revealed nothing. The sound must have come from deeper in the park, meaning there was no imminent danger. Still, the sheer strangeness of it all had my heart racing. I had never heard anything like it before, and the lack of an explanation was what triggered that feeling of pure fear. But that feeling was about to get 1,000 times worse, because when I turned back around and faced the street, that person wasn't lying down anymore. They were sitting perfectly upright, staring at me. In that moment, everything started fading and my vision narrowed. The only thing keeping me from passing out right there was the muffled sound of 1,000 raindrops pattering all around me. Before I could react, That person stood up and started sprinting towards me with a demonic smile on his face. And what's worse, he was holding what looked like a kitchen knife. Up until that moment, I didn't know what it meant to truly fear for your life. I snapped out of my haze and ran as fast as I could in the opposite direction. As soon as I started running, I heard him yell, "I'll kill you," at the top of his lungs. The wet grass made it impossible to run at full speed, but my one saving grace was that whoever was chasing me would have to deal with the same thing. I didn't want to lead him to my house, so I ran towards the trees, hoping I could lose him in the park. That's where the screech had just come from, I know, but I didn't have another choice. I didn't look back once. I just ran like my life depended on it. And considering how insanely cracked out that guy looked, I think my life actually did depend on it. I ran towards the densest part of the park, hoping I'd be able to hide in there before he caught up to me. I didn't even know if he was still chasing me, but I didn't care. Part of me felt like if I stopped running, the fear would catch up to me and I'd pass out immediately. I made it into the woods, and right when I was about to throw up from exhaustion, I ducked behind a tree and tried to catch my breath. I looked behind me, and there was no one, or at least no one I could see. The only thought on my mind at that point was how in the world I was going to get home safely. I didn't feel comfortable moving, so I just waited there. I must have waited at least 20 minutes before finally stepping out from behind that tree. I took the long way home, around the backside of the park and through this other section that spit me out a few streets away from my house. No one followed me. I finally made it home and collapsed on my bed, drenched and basically traumatized. I never got an answer for anything that happened that night. That howl is honestly what confuses me the most. I have a hard time believing it was somehow related to the man that tried to attack me, but it's just too coincidental. I think what happened is that guy heard the screech too, looked up, saw me, and then did whatever he did for whatever reason. As for his motivation, I have no idea. There's just crazy people out there. Maybe he was on drugs or something. I know it's not a real explanation, but I can't think of a better one. I still live in the same house today, and even though several years have gone by, it's hard not to think about this experience every so often.